Now, India's recent strikes on terror camps in Pakistan under Operation Sindoor has sparked criticism from Turkey as well as Azerbaijan, who have backed Pakistan in recent times. Now, this has led to calls across India to boycott Turkish goods and tourism. NEWS9's Shweta Kothari explains what boycotting Turkey and Azerbaijan could mean for their economies, and should India also expect some retaliation, especially on student and medical visas. Here's a quick explainer.
Now, India's recent military strikes on terror camps in Pakistan under Operation Sindoor have drawn criticism from Turkey and Azerbaijan, both of whom have now sided with Islamabad. Turkey and Azerbaijan openly condemned India's counter-terror operations in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and extended diplomatic support to Pakistan. Additionally, reports suggest that Pakistan used Turkish-made drones against India, further fueling public anger. Now, following their support for Pakistan, there are calls to boycott Turkish goods, tourism, and they've surfaced everywhere in the country. Indian travelers and online travel platforms have urged a boycott of tourism to these nations. Indian traders too have begun boycotting Turkish products such as apples and marble. Now, social media campaigns using hashtags like Boycott Turkey and India First are urging Indians to avoid visiting these destinations in future. While the move reflects public sentiment, the economic and diplomatic consequences of such a boycott could be significant. Now, let's talk about economic impact. The trade relations between India and Turkey have only grown. India's exports to Turkey stand at $6.65 billion, which is about 1.5% of India's total exports. India imports from Turkey are to the tune of $3.78 billion, which is about 0.5% of India's total imports, which essentially mean there's a trade surplus in India's favor to the tune of $2.87 billion. Let's talk about India and Azerbaijan. Now, India's exports to Azerbaijan is to the tune of $89.67 million, which is a very minuscule to the tune of 0.02% of total exports. India's imports from Azerbaijan are extremely negligible to the tune of $1.93 million. There is a trade surplus with Azerbaijan as well to the tune of $87.74 million in India's favor. A boycott, therefore, would primarily hurt Turkey, given its higher trade dependence on India, particularly in marble and apple exports. Now, tourism exchange between the two countries is also at an all-time high. Between India and Turkey, in 2024, about 3.3 lakh Indians visited Turkey, which is a significant markup from 2.87 lakh, about 20.7% increase between 23 and 24. With a total tourism revenue of $61 billion, Indian tourists alone contributed to approximately $291 million, spending on an average of $972 per person. Let's talk about Indian tourists to Azerbaijan now. In 2023, they stood at 1,17,302. In 2024, about 2,43,000 tourists visited Azerbaijan from India, which is a markup, a significant increase of 108% from 23 to 24. With average spending of approximately $1,276 per Indian tourist, contributing to nearly $308 million. A complete travel boycott could deal an estimated $600 million blow to the economies of Turkey and Azerbaijan, which in Indian currency is nearly 5,000 crore rupees. So is tourism boycott a diplomatic win? Well, while the boycott reflects public anger, it may not achieve any strategic objective. Tourism contributes 11% to Turkey's GDP, but Indian travelers account for less than 1% of its total tourism revenue. In case of Azerbaijan, tourism sector is even smaller. So any losses would be marginal in the larger scheme of things. Then there is the risk of retaliation. Turkey could tighten visa norms for Indians, affect students, business travelers, as well as medical tourists in the long run. Azerbaijan may revoke visa-free access, complicating travel for Indian professionals who are working there. So there is the risk of retaliatory travel restrictions. But beyond tourism, there could be diplomatic fallout. There could be broader diplomatic consequences, with Turkey and Azerbaijan deepening their ties with Pakistan, further harming India's geopolitical interests. So instead of a blanket boycott, India could consider quite diplomatic measures to discourage anti-India rhetoric. While the tourism boycott reflects strong public sentiment, its actual impact on Turkey and Azerbaijan may be limited. A more strategic approach, combining measured diplomatic messaging with selective travel advisories, could prove more effective than a full-scale boycott. And while India must stand firm on its national security, it must also ensure that its actions don't isolate potential future allies or restrict its own citizens' travel freedom.